If you do not like someone's story, write your own. Changing Narratives with Wambui Kabage.
Hello everyone, this is Wambui Kabage, and today we will be discussing the topic of death. The Qur'an says every soul shall taste death. What does that mean? It means that none of us, any of us, are going to be immune to death. We are all going to die. And the sooner we come to terms with that reality, the sooner we begin to understand how to engage with that reality in mind. So you ask, what has this got to do with conflict? Well, it has a lot to do with conflict, because when you die, you can actually be the cause of a great deal of conflict. And I don't need to preach to anybody, because in this current environment in Kenya, we have seen the effects of what happens when people die. They leave broken homes, broken hearts, and estates, which estates are distributed in different ways depending on how the person left. If you as a person left something called a will, then there is a lot more clarity on many issues. Firstly, how you're buried, where you're buried, issues of custody, of children that you leave behind, issues of distribution of money, and many other things. So that in itself is clear in a will. But if you die without a will, you die in a state of intestacy. That means that distribution has to be determined by somebody other than yourself. The result of which is a lot of conflict. That's not to say if you have a will there will not be conflict, but if you have a will, then you reduce the possibility of conflict. So what's a will, Wambui? A will is your last testament, your last statement of what you want to be done with your body and with your children if you have any, and with the properties that you left behind. It is so important, my fellow viewers, it's very important that you understand this very clearly, that you do not need to have a lot of wealth to write a will. And in fact, a lot of conflict has nothing to do with wealth. It has to do with, for example, where you're buried. Believe it or not, this is a real issue. Right? You may decide you want to be buried in, for example, Langata Cemetery because you live in Nairobi, and that will reduce the financial burden on your family. But you happen to have a family who have a home in the countryside, Ushago, and they want you to be buried there. And your nuclear family doesn't agree. What happens? Conflict. There's a fight. So you really need to think about that. There's some people who say, after my death, I want to distribute my organs to institutions that are reputable and that will benefit a human being who's either about to die or that will benefit research. But your family doesn't have those values and are over our dead bodies, right? So what are you going to do about that? Nothing. Why? You're dead. What about your children? Let's say you leave your children. If you have a spouse, perhaps they perish with you, wherever it is, and then your children are left orphans. Who are these children going to be left with? Automatically, most families would be like, oh, leave it with my mom or leave it with a close relative. But what if you don't have a relationship with those two people? And in fact, you'd rather not have your child stay with those two people or be brought up by those people, right? Then what? Then you leave your children in a state of conflict after your death. That's a terrible thing to do to your family. So I'm here to tell you, folks, that I recommend strongly that each and every one of you make it an intention to write a will to determine all these issues. And this really is a very big issue. And in fact, in the Islamic context, it is part of ibadah. What is ibadah? It is part of worship to write a will, because of understanding the importance of, for example, where a person is buried, how they are buried, how they are washed, All these things are so important and they cannot be left to chance. So please, my wonderful viewers, do yourselves all a favor and go and see a lawyer. It will surprise you that a will is actually not an expensive endeavor to engage in. All the best, guys. Take care.